Welcome, everyone, to Buddha's Center. My name is Jeff Allen, and today we are going over the great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment. The introductory section is where we're at, the beginning of the text, and it's so exciting for me because I remember how excited Rinpoche was when we talked about going back to the beginning of the Lam Rim and putting a little magnifying glass on it and going through it and making sure that we were clear on the meaning and had a real solid foundation in the text, because it's always important to review things, to go over them again and again and again, because that's how we really acquire wisdom. That's how we get rid of the ignorance that we've had since beginningless time. We have such a complicated mess of afflictions that are all driven by our grasping at true establishment and their self-cherishing attitude, that it takes a lot to untangle these things. And it takes a lot of repetition with the truth to untangle these things. If it was so simple, we could just hear the truth once, and then we could use some kind of willpower to no longer, act and behave in certain ways because we knew the truth was a certain way. And then that would just automatically make us modify our behavior. But unfortunately, when we're dealing with a repetitive ignorance, we have to have repetitive wisdom. So it's very fortunate that we have the wisdom in front of us that we can repeat again and again and again in order to be free from this ignorance and the self-cherishing attitude, which disallows us from being a Buddha. And the Buddha is the only being who has a complete freedom from all fears, and then a complete eternal happiness and infinite happiness. The Buddha is the only being who has that. Even the Hinayana hearers and solitary realizers in nirvana, they don't have this eternal, unlimited happiness because of the fact that they still have the obstructions to omniscience. There's not this infinite bliss that they can experience because they still haven't even satisfied all of their own personal needs, because they still have obstructions to omniscience. They still have imprints of those afflictions that they got rid of. And although they're abiding in nirvana, they haven't reached their full potential. So they studied a Dharma that's unlike ours, that leads only to a nirvana of the lesser vehicle, or of the individual liberation kind of vehicle. But we're being presented with the Dharma that produces the result of Buddhahood. And the Lam Rim, the great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment, is such an authentic work that doesn't leave anything out in terms of what to do first, and then all the way up to what to do, right before you become a Buddha. So we see the Tantra section, very little Tantra section at the end of the Lam Rim. And then Lama Tsongkhapa assumes then if we're going to study Tantrayana at that level, we'll read the Lam Rim, the great treatise on the stages of the Tantric path. But in front of us, we have all the foundational practices that are necessary. We have everything that we need in terms of tools in order to cleanse our mind of the afflictive obstructions and the obstructions to omniscience. And the newer translation of obstructions to omniscience is cognitive obstructions. That's a more literal translation, cognitive obstructions. So afflictive obstruction and cognitive obstructions. Obstructions to omniscience is really a description of the word cognitive obstructions. So we're trying to be literal, and we want to be very authentic so that we can hear other teachers when they talk and know what they're talking about. It's important for us to know what this terminology is and what the diversity of terminology is at times. So when you hear a lot of these different words, you'll hear self-centered, self-cherishing. You'll have to know that we're talking about kind of the same thing, this rong chenzing. And when we're talking about, different types of grasping, we need to be able to understand what the specificity is that connects to the Tibetan and the Sanskrit, so that there isn't confusion, and so that we aren't thinking that something the same is different. So that requires study. That requires us to look at varying texts, maybe some different translations of varying texts, just to get a feel of what the lexicon of other translators are. And I want to say this morning, because I'm out of this position now, I no longer have the job of translator, so I can speak on this, but I really, really want you all to just think about all these translators that are out there doing this great work. We would have no idea what Rinpoche said, or the Dalai Lama said, or any of these books said, if people in the 60s didn't go to India. Jeffrey Hopkins and Stephen Batchelor and Thurman and everyone who went to India and started learning how to put this language together and how to present it to Westerners. So really, sometimes the translators just kind of put over here and like, just thought like, oh, okay, they hear yet, okay, and then they leave and it's all about the teacher. But we have to realize that in the Tibetan tradition, the translator is called the eye of the world, the Lotsawa, is the one who opens the eyes of the world. And in Tibet, they really paid homage to the Lotsawas. So I really just pray that whenever you see translators, just say hi and give them a little, respect, give them a kata, let them know that you appreciate the work that they're doing, because they're going to go home and they don't really have much support. They don't have a lot of people to talk Tibetan language with. And like Glenn Mullen said, they're like in a room alone with some dictionary that half of it's going to be wrong in 10 years, and we're trying to muddle through this and make sure that we get it as good as we could. And then someone's going to critique it and say we didn't do it good enough. And then, it will always be about the teacher. But I really, really hope that, as you, stay Buddhists and go to teachings and have experience with translations and translators, that you recognize the importance of that tradition and know that the translator has to know all of the information. So when you see the translator walk in, and if you hear the whole teaching, they already knew those words. They had to know what the meaning of you had to know the content. Translators aren't showing up like, most of the time, with most of the information with no knowledge of the subject whatsoever. And they're just happen to know Tibetan and then they, transfer it to everyone kind of like a machine. And that's just not the case. That's not the case. And I was involved with it for so long, and I was definitely not one of the great translators. I would never, ever assume that. My Tibetan is very weak in terms of, some of the other great scholars in the universities and so forth. But it's because of them that I was able to do what I did. And it was because I was able to get a fraction of their understanding, or a fraction of Rinpoche's understanding so that I could, be the voice of him. So I just really, really, when we pay homage to all the lineage of teachers, I also think it's important that we pay homage to the folks that translated those teachings, because we would be lost without them. I'd be lost. I mean, all of the teachings I received, that I wasn't translating, I relied on other translators, right? All my foundation in Buddhism, I relied on translators, all the books I've read, all the stacks and stacks and stacks and stacks of books. I couldn't have translated those texts in that pure, flawless fashion, year after year, pumping these books out of Snowline and Shambhala. And these translators worked so hard. And there's so many you don't even know the names of, that we look at their texts every day, and they had such an influence in our lives, and we don't even know who they are. There's just amazing practitioners and translators out there that are responsible for our understanding. So that's my speech for this morning on that before we get started. But it's something I've been thinking about a lot as I've been taking this course at the New Delhi Tibet House and hearing the new translations and hearing how specific things are getting and how much cleaner they are than they even were 10 years ago, right? With these incredible scholars that, came up with these lexicons, they're all getting more and more refined. And it's amazing to see, because the more refining we have, the more we have a stable lexicon that we all agree this word is that word in Tibetan or Sanskrit. It was such a problem in Tibet, the king made a law that you had to use certain words at one point in time so that if you were speaking about the Dharma. So the king made like a lexicon with scholars, and then they said, okay, this is what we're all going to agree upon as the words we're going to use to explain these things. And we're not there yet, nor do we have a king, right, that's going to straighten things out like that. But we do have intelligence, and intelligence and wisdom is what straighten things out. That's what makes sure, one of my good friends was asking, how do we be sure that this thing doesn't get, tarnished or become sullied through generations and generations? Truth is truth. Analysis is analysis. You check it. You like the gold. You cut it and rub it and make sure it's accurate. That's what all of these scholars have done. That's what debate is about. Everyone's been debating Lord Buddha, for 2,500 years just to make sure it was clean. And it's the debate tradition, and it's the tradition of analysis and the contemplation that goes along with it that's allowed the lineage to remain pure. And when we say pure, what does pure mean? Does it mean that, oh, the people who were involved with it were really, really special? Yeah, they were special, but they were special because they didn't take any of it for granted. That's why there's 4 tenet systems that you rip apart. There were, all these things that you have to come to terms with related to ignorance. And it really, really requires this investigation and analysis to root out the mistakes that could come up. And luckily, the investigation and analysis has been a living tradition that's gone on. It isn't something that just died and then we read, then the Buddha said on the mount, and this is it, and you have to believe it. No, you have to be like, that doesn't make any sense, Buddha. Prove it to me. Prove it to me. And then when it's proved beyond a shadow of a doubt, and then I can use it and check it for accuracy and use correct signs and reasoning to establish it as accurate, at that point, then, we can say that it's something that I should follow. It's at that point, it's something that I can believe in without being worried about impurity. The impurity is in my mind, so it's going to come up. My interpretation of this will all, can become impure. But if I measure it against what others are saying is true and check it, cut it, rub it, make sure that it makes sense, if I can come up with a consequence to their logic, the Buddha said, then, we should take a look at it. If somebody can take the Madhyamika Prasangika view and negate it wholly, then I'm all ears. We shouldn't be stuck on thinking, unless we've established it through correct signs and reasoning and it's incontrovertible. If we're not there yet, we can't say we know. We don't know. We've heard it. We have blind faith. Maybe we believe it. It sounds like it's a correctly assuming consciousness, right? So if we believe it and what we believe is right, it's a correctly assuming consciousness. But that's controvertible. All you have to hear is something that appeals to your delusions a little bit more. And the delusions in our mind are so strong that we'll chase that because what we believe to be true was not incontrovertible in our mind. We hadn't established it through valid reasoning and through analysis, through inference, and we hadn't gone through those 7 minds that went from wrong view to direct perception. It's clear. So when you see someone who you're like, I don't know what happened. I thought that they were really, really into this thing. Well, they didn't. They weren't. Guess what? They weren't. I mean, how many types of music did you like and think was the greatest thing in the world? And then you found something else and you like that better. And that's not your favorite band anymore. I'm a musician, so you'll hear a lot of music references. But just think about that. You were so sure this was guitar players. I was so sure this was the greatest guitar player in the world. This was my hero. And then it was like, well, no, this one is. And it was because I hadn't established it in my mind as a concrete, incontrovertible fact. And whether you could do that with something that is, kind of opinion, I don't know. But this isn't opinion stuff. This is stuff that we can find out whether it's accurate or not. There's no opinion in here. If it's opinion, well, we have a lot of different opinions about that. Well, which one's right? Because one of them is, or none of them are. It could be that too. But there is a correct opinion. So we don't say, oh, there's no truth. It's empty. There's no actual truth. Yeah, there conventionally is something that's accurate, right? Like if you put oil in the gas tank, it's not going to run. You got to put gas in the gas tank. So there is accuracy. When we look at cause and effect, things don't just happen randomly. They happen in very specific ways in this universe. There isn't just this, everything, the Buddha said, because there's this, there's that, right? So we just have to, when we look at emptiness and we look at these high views of clear light mind and so forth, we have to realize that emptiness proves reality. Emptiness proves conventional existence. Emptiness shows how things could be caused. Emptiness shows how things would work, in a specific order in order to come to fruition. That is what emptiness is. Emptiness is merely a collection of things that come together that serve as a basis for something to be named, right? So emptiness is what allows that thing to be named. If these parts had some inherent existence coming together from their own side individually, they couldn't become a composite that makes something else. It's because of emptiness, it's because of dependent origination that all of this works. So with that being said, let's get started. It was a long introduction, but what's the introduction and what's the end? What's the beginning? I think that as long as we're conveying truth and our motivation is good, I think that's what's important. But traditionally, you would want to have your prayers done, right away to set the proper motivation. But this is the pre-step we're doing here. We're trying to get our mind a little bit bigger before we start saying a prayer. We're trying to get into a place that's a little more intelligent, right? That's allowing us to say, there's no eye, there's no ear, there's no tongue. What do you mean? I have one right here. That doesn't make any sense, Buddha. What does that mean? That sounds like nihilism. Then we're required to find out what Buddha meant. But if we just go, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no mind, it's very easy to land in nihilism, even after you've understood that the Buddha didn't mean nihilism there. So it's important that we open our minds, we're intelligent, we cut and rub this material, we don't take it for granted, we don't say, oh, because the Buddha said it, or because Khensa Rinpoche said it, it has to be true. We see if it is. And then once we know that all of it makes sense from our side, our faith becomes real. Our faith becomes this thing that no matter what goes on, you aren't going to tell me any differently. I don't know if I've arrived at that. I feel that in some cases of some things, I have this incontrovertibility, but I haven't seen emptiness. I don't have inferential valid cognition of emptiness. So what does that mean? That means I'm on one of those stages of understanding in terms of the maturity of the mind going from wrong view to correct view. I'm in a stage where it could change still. I mean, if I'm studying Buddhism and it's accurate and the ways that it works are accurate, I've got to guard my mind because I don't have an inferential valid cognition of emptiness and I haven't seen emptiness. So therefore my mind could change. So I've got to reinforce it over and over again because I might, think that riding in hot air balloons next week is the way to get to Buddhahood. If it appeals to me enough and it's convincing enough, it'd have to be pretty convincing, but just understand that our minds since beginningless time have had this kind of mess. A great teacher said to, I forget what student, but he had like a pile of like all these different spices and stuff on the table. And the teacher took his hand, put it onto the spices and went like this, rubbed it all over his hand. And he said, this is what your mind looks like. And just showed this big mess on his hand and said that, in order to cleanse that mind, you're going to need to do some work. Geshe Dorje Damdu was talking about our Buddha nature. And he said, well, what's Buddha nature like? Well, when we look at water, think of a dirty body of water you have somewhere, something that's so polluted. So someone came up with an Indian river somewhere. I didn't know that it was a river in India. You can't drink, it's super polluted. And he said, so is it the nature that it's polluted? And he said, and people were like, oh yeah, it's very, you can't drink it. And he said, well, what if you use reverse osmosis, send it through a purification system? And then you do all the things that everyone does to make bottled water. That's what, all bottled water goes through this process. Then is it potable? And everyone said, yeah, of course we would drink it. So what is the nature of the water sullied? Similarly, our mind can be cleansed. It's a very coarse understanding of it, but the nature of our mind is such that it can be converted into something pure because it's not naturally impure. If it was naturally impure, permanently impure, didn't have this impermanent nature and ability to mature, if we didn't have this proliferating or maturing Buddha nature, if it couldn't mature, if our mind couldn't mature, if it was static, then it wouldn't be possible. But we, like that dirty water, just need to be cleansed. We just need to engage in the analysis that allows our minds to be freed from all of these misapprehensions, all of the ignorance and the roots off the ignorance and the self-cherishing attitude, and all of those things. So in order to do that, we have to be intelligent. We have to be. It says in the qualities of the student that they should be nonpartisan, meaning like, not coming in with, some sort of prejudice, open-minded is really another way to describe it. A student should be open-minded, knowing I don't know everything, right? I need to be open-minded. And the second quality is intelligent. What you need to be as a student, you have to be intelligent. Does that mean you have to be Albert Einstein? No, it means that you have to use your brain in Western means. You have to use your brain to look at this stuff and not take it for granted with blind faith. That's what intelligent means. It means using your ability to analyze this stuff and use various resources to help you analyze it to come to conclusions. Buddha has all these theses, but Buddha doesn't just make a thesis about a subject. The Buddha then shows the reason for his thesis. And that reason that the Buddha always gives is a correct sign. So the reason for all of the Buddha's statements have a correct, valid sign that we can find. There's a reason why it was said. But if we're not intelligent, we could take it at face value and find out that it's figurative. So it's very important that we use our brains. And with that, let's get into a specific posture. Let's get into an intentional posture with our bodies. The 7-point Virucana posture is the one that we've been reinforcing over and over again. So without much commentary on it, let's get into that posture by crossing our legs in whatever fashion. Ultimately, we would like the lotus position, but whatever fashion we can get them into. Our hands on top, our right hand on top of our left with our thumbs touching in this manner, gently placed in our lap with our arms bowed. It says like a bow. So we have our legs and our hands. We make our back very straight like a stack of coins, shoulders in a comfortable position. Just you kind of feel yourself settling into this position as you get into it. And it'll become more settling as you do it more and more. And you'll find like a click where it's like, whoa, like it's really comfortable. And because at first it seems like this can't possibly be the best way for me to sit. Like because when I sit like this, I feel like I can be a lot more, like think more, and it doesn't seem to be as hard. But when I'm getting into this position, the Buddha said that there's really specific reasons for doing it. So it's important that we do it. So I knew I cut off half in the middle of the 7, but I wanted to say that part. So we put our legs in the comfortable position that we can. We put our hands on right on top of the left, back like a stack of coins, shoulders in a comfortable position, head slightly forward, eyes slightly open, focused at the tongue and focused at the nose. Don't stick your tongue out. Focused at the nose, and then put your tongue behind your teeth in a comfortable fashion. Make your mouth however is comfortable. Everybody's a little different, right? However you find is comfortable. Just have these 7 points, but then settle into them, right? Settle into them without perverting them or distorting them, if that makes any sense. Just one little movement this way will make you settle in sometimes. So just be aware of that. So then now we focus on the breath. So why don't we take a minute or so where we're in this 7-point position with our legs, our hands, our back, our shoulders, our head, our eyes, our tongue, etc. And then let's do some breathing where we focus solely on the breath to try to get our minds kind of reined in from all of the distractions that we are always involved with, sometimes positive, sometimes negative, but we are really trying to focus on something specific here. So even if we're doing some good work, at noon, we're going to the soup kitchen to feed the homeless. If we're doing something like that, we still need to focus on this information very, very clearly so that when we go to the soup kitchen at noon, we can help beings in a really, really intelligent way. and we can really be a better human being, a more capable human being of helping them. Because that's what this is all about. Am I becoming more capable of helping sentient beings through this process? Because it's a Mahayana teaching. My goal, even if it's a goal that I'm hoping I can reach an aspiration for, should be to become a Buddha, or want to become a Buddha. It's, oh, Suma's not happy about that last line for some reason. It's okay. She misses Rinpoche very much. I think we all do. So whenever, this sort of thing is going on, I'm sure that it has a familiarization with even the dogs, that it was an event where we did normally with this really wonderful being. When a bodhisattva or a Buddha leaves the world, it really affects the whole world. And I really can see that. So let's get focused now on our breath for a moment and try to get our minds to a place where we can hear a Dharma that will allow us to become Buddhas as quickly as possible. So begin to think of suffering in general. Think of difficult experiences you had, you thought would never end, that were so hard and so difficult. Think of the various pains that you've had to endure as a result of having this human body. Think about the suffering of birth. We can see that when a baby is born, they immediately cry and they look so terrified. We can see that with our eyes. We know we've had to endure that, and we'll have to endure that over and over and over again until we're enlightened. Think about the suffering of aging. Think about how carefree you were. And think about all the cares that you have to have, responsibilities. The loss of that spark, that youthful energy. It becomes less and less and less as we move closer to death. Think about the sicknesses that we've had, how terrible we felt during those moments, and we will have to feel that an infinite number of times again if we don't get this right. Think about the fact that we'll have to die. We don't know when. The only thing that can help us is Dharma. Think about what might be causing all of this to occur. All results are caused. Suffering is a result. And the Buddha was able to pinpoint what the root cause of the suffering we have to experience is. And the Buddha said it was our ignorance. But then the Buddha said something very hopeful and told us that we could be free from suffering if we relied upon a path. So that gives us some confidence and encouragement that we have a chance to not have to endure these things again. So then we start to think about other sentient beings and the suffering that they have to endure, starting with our friends and then our neutrals and then our enemies. Understanding that our enemies have no stable kind of basis as enemy. They're merely appearing like a flash of lightning in the dark to us like that at this moment. But since beginningless time, they've been as kind to us as the most kind person we can imagine. Think about very specific types of suffering. Imagine you're a fish. Imagine you're swimming in this ocean and you have fish friends, maybe fish kids, and you're relating to this world of fishdom, right? Or this world as a fish, just like you are right now. You're swimming around, you don't know as much, but you have this identity of self, just like you do right now. You're swimming along, and now imagine you've seen something to eat nice. And you go to find that thing to eat because you're an animal and you're just searching for food, hoping nothing bigger eats you, trying to find somewhere to rest. And suddenly you're yanked out of your environment at a rate you've never swum before. And you feel pain and fear that you're being separated from your loved ones and from your environment. And you're scared. And now you're pulled out of the water, and now you really can't breathe. Now, sometimes someone will take a hook out of your mouth and just throw you back in the water and feel as though they've done something wonderful. But most of the time then, you're gasping for air and then beaten with a club until you're bloody and you stop flopping. And if that's not bad enough, now you're thrust from that experience into an intermediate state, into a new form of suffering where you'll have to endure similar things. Now think about that sentient being and think about the fact that we have answers for them. The Buddha has taught us a way for beings not to have to experience that type of suffering ever again. And how nice it would be if we could be involved in that process, if we could make it so a sentient being would never have to be feeling they were in as good a place as they could, and then suddenly ripped from that, afraid, beaten, relieved of their ability to breathe. And how nice it would be if that beings just like that would never have to experience that again. And recognize that our friends, enemies, and neutrals that have been all of those things in relation to us have all experienced that suffering. When we recognize that we would like beings not to suffer like that, and would like them to be happy, not be in pain, makes us feel like we really have to do something about it. And then it makes us say we're going to be the ones that take care of all sentient beings. But unfortunately, we're handicapped. Unfortunately, we don't have an omniscient mind. Unfortunately, we don't know what each and every one of those sentient beings need in order to be free from suffering and be happy. And we look for a being that could provide all sentient beings with a solution. And we find out that it's Buddha. And that should relieve us because we have Buddha nature. We have Buddha potential. We can become that being. In order to become that being, we have to mature into that being. In order to have wisdom, we have to hear wisdom, we have to analyze wisdom, and we have to directly perceive wisdom. So because of the necessity for the gaining of wisdom and compassion and the understanding of reality in general, we're here today. Our motivation should be that we're here today to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. So no sentient being that has been our mother. Imagine that. Imagine the person closest to you right now. If you snapped their fingers and then they were suddenly a fish being yanked out of the water and beaten with a club, you would save them. You would stop the person. You would say, don't do that. That's my son. That's my daughter. Please don't put that line in the water. But unfortunately, we've forgotten all these relationships we have with everyone. We're so close-minded and we're just so limited in terms of our consciousness because we haven't practiced that we've forgotten their kindness. And we just see them as what's in front of us right now, and we don't even realize that we made that. We made what we're seeing. So today we'll recite the Heart Sutra and the rest of the prayers in order to be a little wiser, in order to be a little more capable, in order to be a little closer to Buddhahood. The Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge. Thus have I heard, once the Blessed One was dwelling in Rajagriha at Vulture Peak Mountain, together with a great gathering of the Sangha monks and a great gathering of the Sangha Bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One entered the samadhi that expresses the Dharma called profound illumination, and at the same time, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, while practicing the profound Prajnaparamita, saw in this way. He saw the five skandhas to be empty of nature. Then, through the power of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, how should a son or daughter of noble family train who wishes to practice a profound Prajnaparamita? Addressed in this way, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, said to Venerable Shariputra, O Shariputra, a son or daughter of noble family who wishes to practice a profound Prajnaparamita should see in this way, seeing the five skandhas to be empty of nature. Form is emptiness, emptiness also is form, emptiness is no other than form, form is no other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, perception, formation, and consciousness are emptiness. Thus, Shariputra, all dharmas are emptiness. There are no characteristics. There is no birth and no cessation. There is no impurity and no purity. There is no decrease and no increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no perception, no formation, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no dharmas, no eye dhatu, up to no mind dhatu, no dhatu of dharmas, no mind consciousness dhatu, no ignorance, no end of ignorance, up to old age and death, no end of old age and death, no suffering, no origin of suffering, no cessation of suffering, no path, no wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since the bodhisattvas have no attainment, they abide by means of Prajnaparamita. Since there is no obscuration of mind, there is no fear. They transcend falsity and attain complete nirvana. All the Buddhas of the three times, by means of Prajnaparamita, fully awaken to unsurpassable, true, complete enlightenment. Therefore, the great mantra of Prajnaparamita, the mantra of great insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequaled mantra, the mantra that calms all suffering should be known as truth, since there is no deception. Prajnaparamita mantra is said in this way, Teata om gate gate paragate parasangati bodhisoha. Thus Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound Prajnaparamita. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi and praised noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, saying, Good, good, O son of noble family. Thus it is, O son of noble family. Thus it is. One should practice the profound Prajnaparamita just as you have taught, and all the Tathagatas will rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, Venerable Shariputra and noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, that whole assembly in the world with its gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas rejoiced and praised the word of the Blessed One. Ngala jubene jodambane ngushe duju ngai dudo jen trupa bolam yi bushin si nezongandro sola shatelo agasamara dejana samara ve agasamara dejana samara ve. Agasamara Tashanara Samara Yame, the Adon Gatikati Varagati Varasangati Bodizo, Baba Ganji Sanjika, Doji, 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 Shiva Doji, Jagi Baji Metavision Tanji Shedding Koye, so again, Don Jaji Wada, Midon Nevajan under Wada, Dumba Dunji, Bunson Soji, Jashi de John and de Lezo. So, real quickly, just because some details or maybe you don't know. And I've been hearing a lot of introductory information lately. So in the classes I'm taking, so there are some things that I think are helpful to share. So when we look at this Heart Sutra, this is the second turning of the wheel of Dharma. This is the second kind of collection of teachings the Buddha gave, if you will. The first teaching was in Varanasi, where the Buddha taught the Four Noble Truths. And the Buddha said, this is the superior truth of suffering. This is the superior truth of origin. This is the superior truth of cessation. And this is the superior truth of path. So the Buddha taught that. And the Buddha was really teaching, when we look at tenet systems, teaching in terms of the Vibhashika and Sautrantika school view. So the first turning of the wheel of Dharma was a much more coarse explanation. Other arguments can be made because of the fact that the Buddha turned it 3 times. He said suffering is to be understood after he said those 4 things. Then he said suffering is to be understood, origin to be abandoned, cessation achieved, and path to be meditated on. But then the Buddha said, there is no suffering to understand. There is no origin to abandon. There is no cessation to achieve, and there is no path to rely upon. But those statements, when you interpret them at the first turning of the wheel in technical terms, you would say those statements are interpreted according to the Vibhashika and Sautrantika Sutra school view. The Vibhashika and Sautrantika school view. The Great Exposition school is Vibhashika, and Sautrantika is the Sutra school. So there's 4 schools: the Great Exposition school, which is Vibhashika, the Sutra school, Sautrantika, the Mind-only school, the Chittamantran, and then the Middle Way school, the Madhyamika. All of those have divisions as well, with varying degrees of understanding within the divisions, like little differences within them. Not important, but important just to know the first turning of the wheel of Dharma dealt with those first 2 schools, coarse understanding. And the Buddha, most scholars would agree the Buddha was saying that the Four Noble Truths are established, truly established in some way. In some way, at the end of the day. Then the second turning of the wheel, the Buddha taught the Heart Sutra. And you'll see some interesting points the Buddha made within it to let you determine the differentiation he's making between the first and the second turning of the wheel of Dharma. The second turning of the wheel of Dharma was according to the highest school, the Madhyamaka view. So this second turning of the wheel of Dharma, the Buddha said there's nothing that truly is established. And you find when we're ripping through the Heart Sutra, no eye, no ear, no nose, there's something that we find that it says, no suffering, no origin of suffering, no cessation of suffering, no path, no wisdom, no attainment, no non-attainment. So the Buddha was saying, what is he saying there? There's no attainment or non-attainment? It means there's no attainment that's truly established. There's no non-attainment that's truly established. All of these are empty of true existence because of dependent origination. This does not negate their existence. The Four Noble Truths exist, but they don't inherently exist because all phenomena dependently originate. So that's, just a quick course understanding of historically and view-wise what, goes on at the second turning of the wheel of Dharma. And then the third turning of the wheel of Dharma, which I find to be the most abstract and the least talked about, deals with the Chittamantran school. That's when the Buddha, 10 bodhisattvas showed up and asked some questions. He said, Buddha, first you tell us this is established, then you tell us nothing's established. And then the Buddha taught the mind-only view for those practitioners who weren't really feeling comfortable with the Vibhashika and Sautrantika, but felt like they didn't take enough away in terms of what emptiness was. But then they felt like the Madhyamikas had become almost nihilists. And they weren't sharp enough necessarily. There are beings that aren't sharp enough necessarily to understand that final Madhyamaka view. So the Buddha then taught the mind-only school. All phenomena arises from mind, and the mind-only school feeling that external phenomena are just, from the mind. So just a little historical perspective on the 3 turnings of the wheel of Dharma. And then many, many teachings the Buddha give fit into those types of categories, right? So you see there's all the Kanjur and Tanjur at the Chenrezig Center. You have the Kanjur and the Tanjur, the 100 root text and the 213 authentic Indian commentaries. We almost opened one, the last few months of Rinpoche's life. We were going to go get the 8,000 verse Perfection of Wisdom Sutra. None of those books have ever been opened, by the way, at the center. They've never been read. They've maybe in Rinpoche's room, but I mean, and as a translator, we never opened any of the Kanjur or Tanjur. And I was so excited because one of Rinpoche's students, Kate, had requested teachings on the Prajnaparamita. And I was like, oh, that's so vast. How can we do it? And then we found a story of a bodhisattva that would be wonderful to tell in the 8,000 verse Perfection of Wisdom Sutra. And we were going to get it out, and Rinpoche was going to, read it, at least, bring us through it because it's translated into English. But unfortunately, we never got to do that. So that's going to be one of the first things that I request when the next Larampa Geshe is around, that could teach the 8,000 verse Perfection of Wisdom Sutra. That will be, the first, if we have someone here for an extensive period of time. I don't know who this person is, by the way. I don't have a plan in my mind like, oh, this person's coming. And so I don't want any misunderstandings made here, but someone will come 100%. There's just someone will come. And when that great Larampa practitioner who understands things comes, I will request the 8,000 verse Perfection of Wisdom Sutra to be touched, whatever that means. And Trijung Rinpoche, many great lamas used to teach it. So it's not, even though the sutras aren't something that, we hear that much about in terms of like, let's break this sutra down now, because they're so kind of complex. And they're not really conducive to kind of a short talk. You have to have so much other information in it. But anytime that we can, touch entire sutras and look at them, it's a blessed thing. So that will be one of the things that I'm going to request. If when a Geshe Ma, meaning female Geshe, or male Geshe comes here that's competent to be able to do that, I will request that. So moving on to the outer mandala offering. Let's make an offering of a perfect universe. This is the way that, this is the model that we can use. But when we make this model, it shouldn't be something foreign. We know what a perfect universe, what the most wonderful universe in the world could be without any suffering. The ground is smooth, the skies are clear, just a perfect universe, nothing's rough. There's no thorns, but there's flowers everywhere. The roses don't have thorns. That's my beef with roses. They're so beautiful, but they have thorns, right? So in this pure land, all the flowers are beautiful and they're not rough, and the ground is soft and the skies are clear and the temperature is perfect for whatever perfect temperature could be, right? So this universe that you're offering, don't make it some foreign thing. Make it this like most wonderful paradise that our little minds can come up with. Because if we're just trying to be for the Mount Meru, 4 continents that mean nothing to me, let me just get this done so he can start talking about other stuff. Not helpful. Not helpful at all. We should be imagining that this thing we're doing with our hands, because this is the traditional mudra, it's called, a hand gesture to symbolize something. This is the traditional mudra for making a perfect universe, a perfect environment offering. So when we're doing this, we're imagining we're just offering everything wonderful, right? To the lineage, to the teacher in the lineage, all the way to Shakyamuni. And then don't think Shakyamuni is inherently existent. Shakyamuni had a teacher that was a Buddha too. There's infinite Buddhas. There's so many Buddhas. Infinite's a bad word to use because it's like, oh, you can't count it. There's lots of them. You can say omniscience is infinite, things like that. But when you start talking about numbers of beings that are Buddhas, we have to say maybe more than we can count, use that terminology again. But, there is a number, obviously, because someone was enlightened and then, et cetera. But that's also debatable because with beginningless time, it starts to get complex. And then you need like quantum physicist, mechanic guy, girl to come in and then, figure, I don't know, there's a whole lot to try to figure out how you would start to match beginningless time, countable sentient beings, and so forth. So anyway, we'll leave that to higher pay grade in another time. But it's something to think about, right? We don't just take anything for granted. Let's think about things. Buddha's totally great with us, questioning things. Rinpoche's favorite times of his life with me were when I was like, what do you mean? That sounds ridiculous. Like, I don't, you're telling me flowers are falling from the sky. And he used to always laugh because he knew I didn't like the real mystical stuff. And then the Buddha, when he was done teaching, flowers fell from the sky. And I'm like, where are all these flowers now? And then, I haven't seen any flowers. And he would always laugh. And I always, and especially at the end, there was so many complex things I was grappling with because I was doing a retreat that I wasn't completely, qualified from an education perspective to get through. So I needed to be guided through it. And it was so interesting that the way that Rinpoche and I did it was debate, because that's how he talked to me at the end. Really, we would debate. And it was so interesting how quickly he was able to clarify things and kind of shine a light on ignorance. But anyway, let's keep it moving. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. Holy lamas high, wrap the sky of your Dharma bodies in massive clouds of knowledge and love, and let them pour upon the earth of your disciples as we are ready, a shower of rain, the teachings deep and wide. I send forth this jewel mandala, you precious Guru. Yedang Guru Rana Mandala Gamni Radayami. Sanye Jadan Zaji Janan La Janju Badu Dani Jazu Ji Dagi Ji She Ji Pe Sanan Ji Drula Benji Sanye Jubashu Sanye Jadan Zaji Janan La Janju Badu Dani Jazu Ji Dagi Ji She Ji Pe Sanan Ji Drula Benji Sanye Jubashu Sanye Jadan Zaji Janan La Janju Badu Dani Jazu Ji Dagi Jinye Jibe Zananji Jala Benjia Zanje Jubasho. May this teaching be understood in the language of all beings, and may they all hear it. Okay. So once again, we've won the lottery. We're here on a Sunday morning, and we have the opportunity to learn how to have infinite happiness and how to free all sentient beings from suffering and bring them to infinite happiness. It would be very, very hard to find another set of circumstances one could put together in this life or any life where you could be somewhere to hear how to have infinite happiness and how to bring all beings to infinite happiness. How to never be fearful again, never suffer again, and have infinite happiness. So I think that any intelligent person, if this was believed, would say, oh my, there's nowhere else to be. than at a teaching of the Dharma, not only this teaching, but a teaching of the Dharma, when I have an opportunity to do so. And I can see in my own life, because of Rinpoche's kindness, more of my mind is interested in learning than anything else. More of my mind is saturated with the Dharma. When I say saturated with the Dharma, the concepts and the understandings and so forth, I haven't obviously been able to, transform everything that I would like to, even at a kind of conventional, mundane level. But I have hope. And I know that hope isn't founded in something false. I know that I don't hope Santa Claus is coming, right? And wait at my fireplace, in December, because, sit there and hope, I won't die, hope I won't get sick, hope if I have the right diet, then I could live longer, because that hope isn't really founded in reality. I could have the greatest diet in the world, go out and get the mail, and somebody, recklessly drives down the road and I'm no longer. So I have to understand that some of the hopes I put in this life, I hope that this exercise routine is going to make it so I don't, in our minds, we almost think, so I live forever. I think I could live forever if I do this, set of things and eat the right vitamins. I know they're whole food vitamins are the ones I have to eat, because those are the ones that really will make me healthy and make me live longer, and all of these things that we tell ourselves. And this isn't saying we shouldn't be healthy, but this is saying that we're putting our hopes in something that's not certain. Why don't we have the same willingness to put our hopes in something that's certain, right? If we're willing to, spend the time to get into a car, to drive, to go do all of these things, so we feel better, and buy these things so we're healthier in this life. If we're willing to put all that effort in, wouldn't it make sense if we're willing to do that for something that's just a hope not founded in, anything definitive? Wouldn't it be nice if we just put our effort in to something that was a definitive hope, that it was a hope that would come true 100%, so when that's like an aspiration, we hope we can become a Buddha. We can become a Buddha. Well, the Buddha said everyone will. So that's not a hope. The Buddha's omniscient, and the Buddha said everyone will. So that hope isn't founded in delusion. If you're doing nothing about it and you hope it happens in this life, it's founded in delusion. But if you hope you can become a Buddha because you know you have Buddha nature, it's founded in reality, that hope. So why not put the effort in to match the value, the real value? And that is what this is all about. This isn't about gathering information. I was just reading this morning in the text that sometimes a lot of information will make you a worse practitioner if you're not implementing it. If you're just becoming the greatest wordsmith around Buddhism and you know how to talk the talk, well, guess what? It says in the Lam Rim that you may end up in a lower realm because of that. You have to walk the walk. You have to do the best you can to try to implement these teachings. These teachings do not just fall out of the sky. I've been hearing things lately like, well, the power is in the words and they'll just transform your mind. What? If you don't know what the word means, somehow the word's going to jump into your mind. If you don't have a previous disposition with it, a previous understanding of it, the only way that could happen is if you previously studied it in a previous life and it just suddenly links up perfectly, and then you know what those things mean. That's pretty rare for something like that to happen. We should probably just try to do what the normal thing is and learn what a word means and study it in a text, and then have an incontrovertible understanding of what our goals are, what the steps to those goals are, and not have any ambiguity. Nothing unclear. Because if we leave it up to our own minds to hopefully discern and get some wisdom? We've been ignorant since beginningless time. Our minds deceive us day and night. Renunciation is day and night, thinking about getting out of samsara. Well, our ignorance is day and night deceiving us. So we think we're going to take a partial instruction, put it into this messed up mind, and then have realizations? Maybe like 1 in a billion people who decide to study Buddhism might have that fantastic experience. But a lot of times people who think they have a fantastic experience are realizing all of the things that the Buddha said aren't realizations, are just samsaric realizations that feel good. Because our body is made in such a way with channels and winds and so forth, we can make it feel awesome by doing postures and meditations and yogas. We can make ourselves feel as though we're having these like top of the mountain realizations. And then if we have a little bit of an understanding of emptiness, think that somehow that's it. And it's just not how it occurs. I mean, I will debate anyone who would like to come and try to explain to me how you take these words that you don't understand and then somehow it converts into maturation. You know, I think in some cases you can mature from subtleties, but an overall complete maturation from ambiguity and a lack of clarity. According to Nagarjuna, our wisdom has to be clear like a lamp with the brightest light possible on it that isn't flickering. How could something dull turn into a complete wisdom realizing emptiness and omniscience? It's preposterous. So we have to study, we have to learn this stuff. And we don't only have to learn it, and that's the misinterpretation. When we say we have to study, then people think we only have to study. But Lama Tsongkhapa never said that. Lama Tsongkhapa said, see all the teachings as instructions for practice, because that's what Atisha said. Lama Tsongkhapa never said just gather information. He said gather information to implement. Gather information to combat your ignorance. Gather information to combat your self-cherishing attitude. That's the information you're gathering. You're getting rid of ignorance and you're getting rid of your self-cherishing attitude. You're gathering information that serves as a flamethrower to burn up those two things. This wisdom we're acquiring right now, we're supposed to burn up our ignorance with. We're supposed to burn up our self-cherishing attitude with. And that doesn't just come magically out of the sky. That comes through working on it over and over and over and over and over again. This morning, Geshe-la gave an awesome example. He said, if you had a rubber band, right? And it was a foot long and you wanted it to be 5 feet long, but not go back, what would you need to do? He said, our mind, we do these practices a little bit and we get a little better, but then we feel like we revert back to our non-virtuous activities right away. Seems like we have these epiphanies and then we don't anymore. And why is that? It's because we aren't familiarizing ourselves enough with it. We aren't doing it consistently over and over and over and over again. So Geshe-la said, well, how would you get that rubber band to not snap back? Well, you'd have to hold it there for long enough for it to no longer have elasticity. You'd have to keep holding it in that fashion until it no longer could snap back. And that's what this is about. It's about practicing and refining and getting better, getting a little better, taking a step back, knowing we took a step back because we're looking in the mirror of the Dharma. We know what the Dharma says a step back is. So then we correct it. And then we correct it again, and we correct it again, and we correct it again. And sooner or later, all of those corrections will allow us not to revert back to our non-virtuous behaviors. But in the beginning, we're going to. But we have to recognize when we do and snap out of it as quick as we can. Like Shantideva says, when we're in a battle and we drop a sword, we pick it right up because we don't want to be killed. We don't want to be killed by our afflictions over and over again. We don't want to have to suffer birth, aging, sickness, and death as a result of our unruly mind over and over again. So when we revert back to our old tendencies, we're reverting back to those things that are going to cause us to burn in hell, be a hungry ghost, be an animal, be in the human realm, be in the demigod or God's realm, which is not permanent, is not, and none of those things have any kind of permanent happiness. So we really have to, for a long period of time, the example he gave, he said, well, we were doing this big book project and we had a lot of, texts that we were trying to put together, and they were in sections. So we had rubber bands around them. And we found that the ones that had been there the longest, when we took the rubber bands off, they no longer had elasticity. But the younger ones did. The ones that hadn't been on the book very long were still very elastic, but maybe a little less elastic than a brand new rubber band. So, right, we're like the brand new rubber band. I thought this analogy was so wonderful this morning. We're like this brand new rubber band that's going to keep snapping back to doing it not correctly. And then we have to correct it, modify our behavior, become a little bit better, a little bit better. It's a slow maturation of our mind from this deceptive, deluded, self-cherishing place to perfection. I mean, think about the distance between the two, to perfection. We would need to over and over and over again, get our minds to a place where we don't snap back to imperfection. And that's really what the practice is about. It's about, doing it over and over again, just like holding that thing, 5 feet long as it takes for it no longer to be able to snap back, no longer has the elasticity. Our minds no longer can revert back to grasping at things as truly established and thinking that I'm more important than you. So anyway, so now let's look at the Lam Rim Chemo a little bit. What a great text, what a great opportunity. I still can't believe that Rinpoche gave one of the longest commentaries that we know of. I'm sure there were others, right? Teachers to students. I'm not trying to say something inaccurate, but Rinpoche for over 10 years taught this text. And we're just so fortunate to have all of those videos and to have all of that knowledge right at our fingertips. And when we get to a section in the Lam Rim Chemo, what's so beautiful, if it's not clear, we can just go to YouTube, scroll down, find out the section, because they're all labeled, right? Varieties of karma and renunciation, they're all labeled. We can kind of find the section we're not understanding as well, and then turn it on. That's the wonderful part. And in the future, hopefully, we can get more teachings on the final section of the Lam Rim, because Rinpoche went through it, but many people know that he had some health difficulties at that time. So we weren't able to go through it in the thorough fashion, A, that we did with the rest of the text, and B, my capacity as a translator kind of like hit a ceiling in terms of my ability to translate some of that higher stuff. I mean, the end of the Lam Rim Chemo is considered one of the most difficult sections of a book in Buddhism. It's considered one of the most difficult things to understand, and the frame of reference you need for it in terms of the clarity of tenet systems is unbelievable. Just take a look at Jayan Sheba's great exposition of tenets, and then you'll get an understanding of what I mean when you see the text that's like this thick. It's upstairs right now. I could show it to you, but it's the biggest book I have. And you start reading it, and you want to go to sleep anytime. If you ever have insomnia, you want to blow your mind to bits and, be like, I can't take anymore, pick that book up. And then you'll see what these great scholars were grappling with and why I say something like I hit a ceiling. You'll see it. You'll see, how could you have not hit a ceiling? There's a story there's a text called The Essence of Eloquence. And it's a very complex text, and it deals with basically the same information at the end that's at the end of the Lam Rim Chemo, just and it's in its own book form. And there's a story of this very famous Geshe scholar, and his student comes up and says, "Oh, Geshe-la, do you mind if I go to another teacher's teaching? He's teaching Leshin Nimpo. He's teaching Lama Tsongkhapa's Essence of Eloquence." And he said, "Oh my, someone can teach that?" He said, "Let me get my stuff. I'm going with you." And he was a very famous in the story, it sounds like he's much more famous than the teacher who's giving the teaching, the way that it reads. But we just have to understand that when this information, emptiness is very slippery. The nature of reality is like, oh, I get it. No, I don't. I get it. No, I don't. You get it, and then you read like the 20 emptinesses, and you start to understand there's even the emptiness of emptiness, and true ultimate truth is empty. And you start to grapple with those topics, you start to see that, oh, I see. This direct perception of emptiness, this emptiness thing, this object of observation isn't just, oh, because there's causes and conditions that everybody could figure out if I told you, once what I mean, that's it. And it's a lot more to it than that. And once you start to find out what some other possibilities other than emptiness are, they start to sound really good. They start to sound very, very logical. And if they sound very logical, that means that you would believe them. And that means that you don't have a controvertible wisdom. So it's important to see them. And I'll tell you, you read even some of the lower schools, they, I would almost challenge you if I took a book, took the headers off, took all the headings out, and handed it to you and said, this is the Madhyamika view. And it was maybe the lowest school's view. I would challenge many of you, including myself, to be able to negate it and be sure it wasn't the Madhyamika view. And if I found something very, very subtle, not some coarse thing that, the I phenomena is established, not one of those statements, but other statements that are a little less, that are a little less clear. So we don't be satisfied with partial instructions. And if you see emptiness directly, you'll know it. And you'll know you didn't have one. But I know for me, that's going to require me knowing what's in Jayan Sheba's book and how to negate everything except the final view that is presented. And not to negate it for your sake, for my sake, because I may still believe it and not know it, because ignorance is a very, very deep ocean. How many times have we thought, oh man, I really got this, and then it slips out of our hands? It's amazing. It's amazing even when we do meditation. Even when I did the retreat, I did all these details and I memorized all this stuff. I don't remember half of it, trying to go back to it. But when I was in the midst of it, I thought it would be the rest of my life was going to function like, like this really special way that seemed to transcend things. And no. I got a little imprint, I got a little taste, a little taste of the juice, if you will, but without the real realizations, it's just a taste. It's nothing more than a taste, but those little tastes are what keep us going. Those little tastes that make us say, oh, yeah, I at least I know I had that little taste and I know what it tasted like. And boy, I would like a bigger glass of that. And that's what keeps us going. So that's what keeps it interesting. So we are now in the section. We're about to get into the actual instructions for practice. But before we do so, we have to clear up some other business within the Lam Rim Chemo that is an instruction to practice as a preliminary to understanding the instructions to actually put into practice. So let's talk a little bit about that. So when we go to the outline of the Lam Rim, of course, we see that there's showing the greatness of the teaching's author in order to establish that it's from noble origin. We went over that clearly. Showing the greatness of the teaching in order to engender respect for the instructions. We went over that. And how to listen to and explain the teaching. So we went over to how to properly listen to a teaching last week. We talked about gaining this attitude that is different from these three vessels. We don't want to come in here not listening. We don't want to come in here with kind of partisanship or pervert, kind of a closed mind, they'll call it. And we don't want to come in here just not really listening well enough so we forget it all. We want to make sure that we see ourselves as an ill person who needs help the instructor like a doctor, the Dharma is the medicine, taking the actual practices, putting the practices into our lives, are taking the medicine, recognizing the greatness of the Buddha, and being terrified that this stuff could leave this world, and wanting it to remain for a very, very long time. So these are the kind of foundations that we should have when we listen to a teaching, according to the Lam Rim Chemo. We should hear it in this way, so that we are able to have the wisdom arisen from hearing in a complete way, so that then we can analyze that wisdom. So now let's move on to how to give a teaching. And this is important because many of you will explain Buddhism to others in one form or another. Maybe you'll become formal teachers. I have no idea whatever anyone else will do. I don't even know necessarily, what I will do. But when it comes time to do something like I'm doing right now, there's advice for it. And don't think that it is only, sitting in this seat like I am right now. You could be giving a Dharma teaching in many, many different ways when you're giving advice to try to free sentient beings from suffering. So here are the things we should do. First, we contemplate the benefits of the teaching. We develop reverence for the teacher. Now, this is to the teacher. So teacher is referring to Buddha in this case, because we're talking about it as a teacher. We're an instructor at this point. So who is the teacher? The teacher's Buddha. We're, for us, the teacher is the Buddha, because we're not saying anything that's from us. It's only from the Buddha. We're just parakeets in a way, right? But that can analyze what they're parakeeting. So we're different than animals, but we're just using that as a way to say it. But we're really not coming up with anything new. Other traditions, there are some kind of new things that come into this world, but in our tradition, we're not coming up with anything new. With what sort of thoughts and behavior you should explain the teaching, and then differentiating between those whom you should teach and not. That's always interesting to me. Like, what do you mean? What does that mean? So anyway, let's get started a little bit. So Maitreya talks about these benefits. And I always think it's very holy to quote, even though they're just words. And maybe we don't all know what each one means or know the detailed commentary on it. I think it's very, very beneficial to quote things. So this is from the Exhortation to Wholehearted Resolve Sutra, and it says, Maitreya, there are 20 benefits of generosity with which you give a gift of the teaching, without concern for material things, profit or honor. What are the 20? So here, when we look at generosity of the Dharma is one of the types of generosity, giving the Dharma, being generous with the Dharma. We shouldn't be stingy with the Dharma. So if we aren't stingy with the Dharma, if we're generous with the Dharma, then what will happen? And before I read this, we need to make it clear that we aren't proselytizing. We aren't trying to convert people. When we say, talking to people about the Dharma, we're just trying to be an example. If someone asks us or we feel they're suitable, we'll get into that, then it's appropriate to talk about it. But we shouldn't suddenly find out the Dharma, right? And then go to our families and be like, well, you aren't grounded in truth, or try to use it in such a way that's disparaging, or that disrupts a family, or makes those around you uncomfortable. You have to be skillful. A bodhisattva doesn't make people uncomfortable unless it's really, really necessary for them to learn, progress on the path. When we look at how the Buddha taught people, he always did it like Columbo. It's so funny to me. Anyone who's watched Columbo, Buddha always shows up in town like he doesn't know much. It's like, yeah, what? So what are you studying? Oh, yeah, you're studying that. That seems interesting. But, I studied that before too. And what really always got me, I couldn't understand, maybe you can explain it to me, is how something perfect created someone like me. So the Buddha would always be like, there's just something, it's just not, the Buddha would never go into it. Buddha would always go into it at scope. And then the Buddha, through the conversation, sometimes would walk away, say, oh, very good. Because if the whole point is to become more compassionate, become more loving, to become less ignorant. And that doesn't mean that you can't do that in any other way, to become more, right? So sometimes Buddha said, well, wow, if I keep going with this teaching, this might make people fall off all of virtue. This may make them say, oh, then I shouldn't do anything because that doesn't make sense. And now that doesn't make sense to me either. If the Buddha taught Madhyamaka to someone not ready that was believing in, a creator God or gods, and they weren't ready, they may say, oh my God, nothing exists and God doesn't exist. I don't have to behave. And they were already behaving. They were already engaging in the higher training and ethics in some ways. Not the highest higher training, but the non-Buddhist traditions have training in ethics, wisdom, and concentration. So we have to remember that. We have to understand that. And when we get very excited because we've got this new thing we've learned about, that we don't throw it down everybody's throat, because that's not going to turn them towards the truth. And it might throw them off of a truth that's important. So now the benefits of imparting the teaching. You will come to have recollection, intelligence, understanding. So this is all just from giving a teaching, from instructing. This isn't like when you become a Buddha. These are saying that by teaching, these things will happen. Recollection, intelligence, understanding, stability, wisdom, super mundane wisdom, little desire, little hatred, little ignorance. And then demons will not have an opportunity to harm you. If you want harmful spirits and so forth not to harm you, get to a point where you're qualified to teach, and then teach it. If you want all these external obstacles to stop harming you, it says right here what to do. Teach. And if you teach, and then what did we learn last week on Thursday? If you get bodhicitta and become a bodhisattva, the Dharma protectors protect you. So there's all this protection around you if you start to understand reality, because it's ignorance that's causing all of the mess in the first place. So it says, the Bhagavan Buddha will think of you as a precious only child. So the Buddha sees that you're explaining the doctrine, and you've created this even more connection with the Buddha. The Buddha sees all beings as a precious child. So the Buddha doesn't have any kind of bias. So you are creating more connections from your side for the Buddha to be able to react. But understand, the Buddha has non-biased infinite love and compassion. But the Buddha doesn't necessarily connect to every sentient being unless there is a condition for that sentient being to connect with the Buddha. Because it's dependent origination. The Buddha isn't have this free will. The Buddha would just fix us all because of compassion. If the Buddha could just show up and fix us. We play a part in the fixing. We play a part in the connection to that Buddha. When we say, please, Rinpoche, in all of our lives, may we not be separated from you, we're doing the same thing. We're creating, even though we know Rinpoche has love and compassion for all of us, we're reinforcing it from our side. So when you see stuff like, oh, well, now the Buddhas will really love you if you teach, understand that it's from your side. You have more conditions present to be helped because you've connected more conditions, causes and conditions to that being. That being is not omnipotent. That being is under, not the control of it. It's not, I don't know the best way to say it, but the Buddha has to function within the terms of that we are functioning. Like if we don't have the karma for the Buddha to come, the Buddha can't just come. The Buddha functions within karma. That's the best way to say it. The Buddha functions within karma.
How do we know you're right?
But the Buddhas, I'm sorry, was there a question? Okay, so the Buddhas function within karma. They don't have the ability to change us. Like we read, the Buddhas can't wash away our sins with water, right? The Buddhas can't, remove our sufferings with their hands. They can't give us their realizations. They can only teach us. And we have to be a vessel to be able to be taught. And the more we become a vessel, the more we connect to those who can free us by teaching us. Make sense? And the more we know, if we can instruct someone, then we've really connected to that in a very, very grand way. So that's why. Non-humans will guard you. Deities will bestow charisma and power on you, meaning they'll think that you're somebody who should be in a good position, like they'll think like that's someone who should really be in a good position and someone people should listen to. Enemies will find no opportunity to harm you. Friends will remain steadfast. Your words will be trusted. You will remain fearlessness. You will have abundant happiness. You will be praised by the wise, and your gift of the teaching will be worthy of remembrance. So hopefully you're saying something that will be worthy of remembrance if you're teaching the Dharma. And it says that with regard to the fourth, we'll move on. Developing reverence for Shakyamuni. So it says the teacher. There's a capital T in the outline in the English. So whenever you see that capital T in Buddhism, a lot of times, it's not at the first part of the sentence, obviously. That's usually referring to Buddha. So when you see that capital T, that's usually referring to Buddha. It says when the so when the Buddha gave the first teaching of the first turning of the wheel. I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. When the Buddha taught the Prajnaparamita at the second turning of the wheel, it was like something just hit me in the head saying I was wrong. When the Buddha gave this teaching at the second turning of the wheel of Dharma, he actually constructed his own throne because he knew what he was going to say was the ultimate thing to say. And he had to pay reverence to the Buddhas that taught him that. He knew that those words were the truth, were the Dharma. So the Buddha built with his hands a teaching throne to get onto to teach the Dharma. He didn't say, oh, you followers, build me a high seat. He said, I'm going to speak something that's so amazing. I have to sit higher to speak it because it was spoken to me and I know it's truth. So the Buddha paid homage to truth by setting up his own teaching throne. Likewise, since the teachings are respected even by the Buddhas, when you explain the teachings, be very respectful of the teachings and the teacher, Shakyamuni. So next, it says what sort of thoughts and behavior you should have. So now the teacher takes part of the ideas that the students have. So the teacher now, okay, so the students see they're ill. Now the teacher sees them as a doctor, themselves as a doctor, giving medicine and so forth. So it says, think of yourself as a doctor, the teachings as the medicine, those listening to the teachings as sick persons, and the Tathagatas as excellent beings, and wish that the teachings remain. So you change it a little bit. You think of yourself as a doctor. You think of you have some patients around you, and the teachings that you're giving is medicine to the sick people. And then you think of the Tathagatas being great and that the teachings remain for a long time. So those are 5. So there's 6 ideas you have when you're listening, because you add this one, you have this idea that you think of yourself as a sick person. The taking of the medicine itself that the practitioner has to do, the teacher can't do for them, is the part that's omitted if you look at it. The teachings are the medicine. So what's omitted? You have the doctor you're thinking of yourself as. You have the teachings that are the medicine. You have those listening to the teachings as a sick person, the first idea. And then you have the Buddhas as excellent beings, which is the 5th idea in those 6. And then that hoping the teachings remain for a long time, which is the 6th. And if you're teaching the Dharma, you're really doing a part in making them remain, right? So you have to have listeners for the Dharma to remain, and you have to have teaching. You have to have someone instructing the Dharma in order for it to remain. So you become part, when you instruct the Dharma, of it being held in the world and stable and solid. So that's important. And then you should cultivate, it says that you should cultivate love for those who are going to listen, that you want them to have happiness in the causes of happiness, that you're teaching this so that they can become happy. And you should give up any jealousy or fear or think that you're better, etc. Abandon dispiritedness. You should be able to explain something 1,000 times without over and over again, if you have to, in order for people to understand it. And then it's interesting, if you're looking at this information, some of the things that are loaded into how to teach the Dharma are the qualifications of a teacher. So I encourage you to match those sections up. How to instruct the Dharma. What are the qualifications of a teacher? And you'll find those sections do match up at times. A lot of them. Abandoning dispiritedness, that's right in there, right in the Maitreya's points about the qualifications of the teacher. Abandoning dispiritedness is one of those qualifications when we look at it. Rely on a Mahayana teacher. So this is an ornament for the Mahayana Sutras by Lord Maitreya. Rely on a Mahayana teacher who is disciplined, serene, and thoroughly pacified. That refers to ethical, has concentration and wisdom, has good qualities surpassing those of the students, is energetic, has a wealth of scriptural knowledge, possesses loving concern, has thorough knowledge of reality, skill in instructing, and has abandoned dispiritedness. One of the 10 qualities of the teacher that a student should look for is one of the qualities Lama Tsongkhapa says you should have when you're teaching. So he's training, we're being trained how to be qualified. Very, very excellent. And then we get the next part, after we get trained to be qualified, the next section is relying on a teacher. And then that kind of even enhances us more and more and more. It enhances our understanding more and more and more. So your behavior, you should, be kept, not look like disheveled. It says, you should be kind of put together. It says, make yourself clean. Don't put on dirty clothing. Sit upon a seat and a cushion in a clean and attractive environment. So if you're giving a formal Dharma instruction, those are the suggestions that are made. And then it says to recite a mantra for overcoming demons, or you could recite the Heart Sutra or the mantra of the Heart Sutra. The Heart Sutra is said to be the ultimate remover of obstacles. It's even stopped a war when it was recited a number of times historically in scripture. So that's the kind of value and weight that's put on it. And then the Lotus Sutra says, the learned always give without jealousy, sweet sounding teachings with manifold meanings, having thoroughly cast aside laziness. They're not dispirited to repeat teachings again and again. The learned give up all that is repugnant and cultivate the power of love towards those around them. Day and night, they cultivate the supreme teachings. Using millions of examples, the learned bring joy and delight to those listening to their teachings. They never have the slightest desire for worldly gain, not thinking of sustenance, hard or soft foods, or drink, or clothing, or bedding, or religious robes, or even medicine to cure their illness. They ask nothing at all from those listening to the teachings. Rather, the learned always think, may I myself and all living beings achieve Buddhahood. And whatever teaching I impart in order to help the world is a completely favorable condition for my happiness. So how could I want more? Now, that does not sit mutually exclusive with the fact that the teachings have to be supported. I mean, we live in the real world. Everyone knows you have to buy food and medicine and drink, but you as an instructor should not be doing it for that reason. You should not be saying, oh, well, I'm learning all this information and then I can make $1 million off it. You could, you may, but probably not, but the motivation shouldn't be anything but to make it so beings are happy and knowing that this is how you ultimately become happy and be free from fear and so forth. So who should you explain it to and who shouldn't you? just some advices that are important, but a lot of these are maybe, there's always exceptions to every rule, and we have to use our good judgment. If we're going to deviate from something that the Lam Rim says, we better have a really good reason and justify it with logic, and then check it like 25 more times to make sure that we're not just using our ignorant mind. Maybe call a friend too. But it's important to look what the scripture specifically says before we look at how anything could be modified. So don't explain the teachings without being requested, it says. Because in the Vinaya Sutra, it says it should not be done without a request. Even when requested, it's necessary to investigate whether or not the potential suitable is suitable to receive it. Is this too high of a teaching? Is this something that will make them lose faith altogether? Is this something that's just out of the ballpark? If I just started listing all the divisions of phenomena, and that's all I did every week, I just classifications and divisions and just listing them and thinking, oh, you're all super high scope and you know what they all mean, because you can just meditate on those words and they'll come to you. The meaning will come to you, that wouldn't necessarily be beneficial unless I knew you were all sharp capacity beings that had all these imprints that would come to fruition. And even when not requested, so it just tells you don't teach unless you're requested. And then it says, but if you're not requested, it's appropriate to explain teachings to someone only if you know they're suitable. So that's, you got to know they're suitable. So that puts a lot of pressure on a teacher, but you should have it because you're explaining something that's messing around with people's spiritual future. That you should be nervous and take this seriously and make sure you're checking whether or not what you're saying is appropriate. Right? It's so obvious. The King of Concentration Sutra says, should someone request you to bestow the teachings, first say, you do the Colombo. I'm not really extensively trained to teach someone as knowledgeable and as wise as you. Maybe, you start with humility, that's what it says in here. Obviously, you don't do this every time. If you have somebody like a Geshe Larampa and someone who's never heard of Buddhism walks in the door, and, I highly doubt that the Geshe Larampa is going to say, but I've seen many circumstances where Rinpoche has said that to a whole room when there were a lot of scholars in the room, where he said, you may know this more than I, but I'm going to do the best I can to explain this. How many times do we hear Rinpoche say, this text is really difficult. I don't know it very well, but I'll do the best I can. And then just like, and then do what Rinpoche did, But that's how he approached things, with that humility. We watched it. You go turn on teachings when they first start, when he first starts a new text, and he'll say, all these great beings that have taught this, I feel humbled and I feel a little bit almost like hesitant, but I'm going to do the best I can because he read the benefits of teaching. It's so clear. It's so cause and effect. It's, if you saturate your mind with this, it's so incontrovertible at times. It's like, wow, it's like coming home for me when this stuff really started to seep in. I was like, oh my God, it was like coming home in a diluted way at first. It was like wearing it like a new kind of outfit, with the mala on my neck, the tattoos. I got tattoos of Buddhas on me, like right after I became Buddhist. Isn't it funny, right? What's the first thing you should do when you want to get rid of self-grasping and self-centeredness? Tattoo yourself up. Put Buddhas on you so everyone looks at you and thinks you're spiritual. And that's what I did, But now I can recognize that. But at first it felt that much home for me, that I started putting Buddhas on, drilling them into my body. And then I realized it wasn't a good idea. And I went to Rinpoche. I said, I feel so stupid. I don't know what to say. First I shaved my head off. I had blonde like mohawk. Long story. I was in a rock band, like gauge earrings all over the place and stuff. And first I got rid of that stuff. And then I realized, wow, man, these tattoos. I'm like, I have Buddhas under my arms, under my arms where I'm sweating. Thought that was a great idea. What do I do about this? And Rinpoche said, well, not saying you're one, he made that clear, but he said bodhisattvas actually paint Buddhas on their bodies. So look at it like that. Just look at it like you're always honoring it, and that you're hoping you can become a Buddha, bodhisattva. That would be so like seeing the Buddha as the only solution, as their hero, that they'd want to paint them all over themselves. And it gave me practical advice on how to get over my guilt about being ignorant. And it was like, well, can you do anything about it? And I was like, should I get it removed? And he's like, should you? Should you start tarnishing the Buddha, week after week until you can get it to go away? You think you should do that? So everything is subtleties. When we move on the path, we're going to get to a place where we're so embarrassed about our behaviors. We will. What do we do about it? Just sit and hate ourselves, or be embarrassed, or embarrassed about the ways that we were thinking, or maybe things we did when we were younger? No, we just don't. We move forward. We look at a way that we can operate in the reality we're in right now and do the best we can with it. We do the best we can to become better people. That's it. We do the best we can on a daily basis to mature. And that's all we can do. It says, you act humble. And then it says, don't impart the teaching casually. But only after you have investigated whether the listener is suitable recipient. If you know the listener is suitable, explain the teaching even without a request. So don't be lax about it. It says, don't just like kick back, put your feet up. Yeah. And then the Buddha said, realizing you're saying, get in, like I said, get into a physical posture. I'm sitting on this thing. I'm Indian style. I'm paying respect. I'm sitting on this seat, as a sign of respect for what's about to happen. And I don't take it casually at all. I make sure that I've prepared. I make sure that I know the section to go to, and that I have analogies and so forth. A lot of it is just, in the moment, because I've trained with Rinpoche for so long. But the general framework of every one of these talks is made before the talk, the 15 or 20%, and the rest of it's filled in by Rinpoche's kindness. I really, really am so fortunate to have been able to have been downloaded by Rinpoche with all this stuff that, all this information that will allow me to become a Buddha. And he didn't miss any points. So the more I familiarize myself with it, the more I'll remember it, because it's in there somewhere. And the more intelligent I become, the less I have to suffer, and the more I can help others. So, and then what do you do at the end? Here's another thing. So it says, there's a sutra on discipline. I'm going to read this. While standing, do not explain the teachings to one who's seated. So this is just all out of reverence. And, probably a lot of cultural things in here too. If in a million years, it's respectful to stand up while, you know what I mean? Like, in that way, then that would be fine. But in this context, it's saying, don't explain teachings to one who is seated. While seated, don't explain teachings to one who's lying down. So you shouldn't be on a throne while someone's just laying down on the floor and listening. But then there's a part coming up in a minute. While you're seated on a low seat, don't explain the teachings to someone sitting higher. It's also with regard to good and bad seats. Don't explain them to someone walking in front of you while you walk behind. Don't explain them to someone walking on a path while you're on the edge. I always wondered why that was. Is it because if they don't like what you say, they can push you? I'm always curious why it says that. And I don't know. Do not explain them to someone who has their head covered, with a hat, their upper robe up, folded on their shoulder, arms crossed in front of them, hands behind their head, lean back. If they have a top knot, they shouldn't be wearing a hat, a tiara. That'd be funny if one of you showed up with a tiara on. I'm here. That'd be funny. And whose head is wrapped in cloth. Do not explain the teachings to someone riding on an elephant or a horse, someone sitting in a sedan or a carriage, someone wearing shoes or boots. Do not explain them to someone holding swords and weapons and spears and umbrellas. And so you get the point. You should be talking to someone who you have their attention and they see, that you're saying something of importance and they're respecting it and you're respecting it. So they are, right? You're respecting it. So you insist they do too, because it's such a holy thing that's just not wishy-washy information you're about to give. So I think that's the most important part. Just know that when you're talking about it, that it's not just some general information that's just kind of coffee talk. It's something that will be the cure for everything. So when you're speaking of something that's a cure, that's so rare that most people don't know of, by giving it that extra special respect, we strengthen our own faith. All this stuff is to make ourselves better. It's not about the person sitting funny. It's about our faith strengthening and us being a real teacher that says, don't sit like that. You're about to hear the Dharma. You're not gonna lay down, sit up. Geshe Gompo would see texts on the floor. He'd get off of his teaching throne. Like someone would put their book on the floor and he'd be teaching and all of a sudden he'd get up and we'd be like, what's he doing? He's teaching. And he'd go pick the book up and put it on a table and get back on the throne. So that's what it means. I've just had such great teachers. Wow. So fortunate, right? So fortunate that I met that being we're talking about in Drepung Losaling in South India. And we both cried the first time we met and he touched his head to mine. Rinpoche said, as soon as you get to Drepung, Geshe Gompo is your teacher. He's my student. He's like 2 years younger than Rinpoche. He's my student and he's a great scholar. And you will connect with him. I didn't know what that meant. I'm like going, okay, where's Geshe Gompo? Anyone know Geshe Gompo? And I'm looking, I'm asking around. I finally get to his room and I open the door and my whole world changed. I didn't have something, I met this being. My whole world was like that. I knew karma was so real at that moment. I didn't know what it was. I don't know anything about my past lives, please. I'm not pretending that, but I just had this connection that we both wept and he held his head to mine for like a period of time. I'd never done that with another Tibetan. Usually you touch it and then you release it and he just held it there and held me. And I just felt so protected. And I just feel so protected by this lineage of truth because I know they never told me anything that wasn't going to free sentient beings from suffering. I was never misguided, ever. And it's just, I'm so fortunate that I got into Buddhism and I just found like the treasure trove of teachings and teachers. The first teachers I took on were Nyingma lamas, and they were such qualified teachers. I just went through like a directory and found a place to go to a retreat. And now that I can really look back on it, I come to find out that they were lineage holders. They were high Nyingma lamas that gave me my refuge vows. I didn't know anything that was going on at the time. I went to a silent retreat where you couldn't eat. I didn't know what was going on. I read a book on Buddhism, wanted to be a Buddhist. They told me I had to take refuge. I went to this retreat like 5 hours away in upstate New York. People, I had no idea who they were. I got there, they told me I couldn't talk or eat. They chanted all this different stuff. And then at the end of it, people started talking again. And then I got to meet with the lamas and take refuge. And at the time it was neat. I have to be honest. At the time it was neat. Then I went to their house even, and they gave me like mantra recitation practice. But that neatness is what made fertile ground. That finding it neat, those connections were making the fertile ground for me to grow into the knowledge that I have today. That's limited, not limitless, but a lot less limited than it was. It doesn't resemble the limitations that I have now in terms of what I'm trying to understand don't resemble the limitations that I had before. The limitations that I thought I had before in terms of like this real mundane, like, oh, I just like to know what that means and that means. I feel as though like some of those things I've been able to, try to expand upon because of the kindness of Khenso Geshe Wandak. And all of you have these same experiences and will have these same experiences. So how do we end the session? And then I'll end it here. With strong aspiration, dedicate the virtues that have arisen from explaining and then hearing, because we're at the end, you know, because the last section is what do you do at the end of a session of a teaching that's great, right? That you have heard. So then it says, dedicate the virtues that have arisen from explaining and hearing the teachings to your temporary and final objectives. Temporary to be able to get the realizations that you need to the final objective of Buddhahood. If you explain and listen to the teachings in such a manner, then you unquestionably receive the unforesaid benefits even from a single session. If you do it once, you get these benefits. Wow. Thank you, Rinpoche, right? You will clear away all karmic obscurations that have been accumulated through not taking to heart the instructions on hearing and explaining the teachings, and that result from not respecting the teachings and the teacher and so forth. So all of that disrespect that you've accumulated by giving a teaching gets wiped away. And since beginningless time, we've disrespected the teachings. Wow, how amazing is that? Further, you stop new accumulation of these obscurations. So if you are doing this, you stop accumulating the disrespect of the teaching if you're teaching it. So you're not accumulating more. If you're doing it correctly, for the right reasons. We just learned how to do that. Also, insofar as you have taken to heart this way of explaining and listening to the teachings, the instructions that are explained will benefit your mind. So it's not only the people you're talking to hear this stuff and benefit, it benefits my mind by talking it. It will benefit your mind by teaching it. After all, the former excellent beings realized this. They practiced earnestly. In particular, the former gurus in the lineage of these instructions made very earnest and great effort in this activity. So this is a teaching lineage that we're in. This is a lineage where they said that what was the saying? That the sons and daughters will be greater than the fathers, and their sons and daughters will be greater than them, and their sons and daughters will be greater than them. Something like this, because the lineage is being always examined by truth, and maybe an easier way to explain truth, or a more clear way to explain truth to certain disciples. So this is a living tradition of explanation. This is a great instruction. You will not transform your mind without being certain about this. So if you don't listen right, so this is talking about the, how to listen to a teaching and how to explain a teaching, all these things. You will not transform your mind without being certain about this. Without that certainty, no matter how extensively you explain the profound teachings, these very teachings often serve to assist your afflictions, like a helpful deity that becomes a demon. So we really, really need to look at how to do this stuff in order to not turn it into, a god into a devil, as the angels into devils, right? Consequently, it is said, if you mistake the 15th day, this is a big quote, of the lunar month, the era lasts until if you mistake the first day of the month, basically, the era lasts until the 15th day. So if you get it wrong from the beginning, it will continue to be wrong. If you get the wrong day, like if you think it's the 2nd and it's really the 1st, you're going to think it's the 30th instead of the 29th, right? And you'll have the wrong date altogether. So it's saying that you need to understand. Thus, those with intelligence should work at it this way of successfully learning, hearing, and explaining the teachings, and should have at least a portion of these qualifications every time that they explain or listen to the teachings. So it's not saying you have to be a Buddha, a great reincarnate Lama. It just means you have to be qualified and know this stuff and have some of these things that will benefit others. And you can read into all of these things and figure out if you believe you fall into that category or not, if you believe that you could be of benefit or not, and then make your decision. Everybody has to make their own decisions on what they think is best to do and what they think could be beneficial for others. And, as Rinpoche would always say, Ronsen, like freedom, he'd say freedom, meaning you're free to do as you wish. But this is what I say. Very interesting. Rinpoche would always say, freedom. Like when he'd say, well, we're not doing this or we should do that. He's freedom. and say, you're free to do what you want, but it doesn't mean that that's what's best for you. You know, today, Geshe Dorje Damdu said, if we're seeking happiness, should we, you know, be kind to ourselves just and say, oh, let's have temporary happiness, or should we be wisely kind and seek eternal happiness? Should we go out to the nightclub and have a little bit of happiness, and then tomorrow it's over? You know, and we feel like hungover. He said, we go to the pub, you know, we go out with our friends and we have this wild night and we feel like that had some sort of happiness. Then it's like a flash of lightning, it's over. Then we maybe feel sick. And then now the things that we did that night are causes for more suffering. The things that we did that led up to, and then while we were maybe, you know, doing all that stuff and yelling and being not mindful, now cause us to have suffering. So we were seeking happiness, but we didn't do it in an intelligent way. We wanted to have a little fun, but unfortunately, that wasn't an intelligent way to go about it, because we could always only have fun if we do this right. So we're not going to get bliss out of a night like that, but we can get bliss eternally from this. So we have to be really, really intelligent about the way we seek happiness. This is the most important. Thus, those with intelligence should work at it in this way of successfully hearing and explaining the teachings, and should have at least a portion of these qualifications every time that they explain or listen to the teachings. This is the most important prerequisite for teaching these instructions. And then Lama Tsongkhapa says, go look at some other books. I'm only telling you this in a short way. I'm not going to go into some excessive verbiage. He says this a lot in the Lam Rim Chemo. He's like, I'm not going to go on and on. He like stops short and he says, I'm not going to go on and on and on. And it seemed like he just did, right? That's the funniest part. Whenever you read these very intense sections, Lama Tsongkhapa is like, well, I'm not going to really go into full detail about these things. So, you know, if you really want to know this topic, you should search out like some of the traditional resources and the authentic commentaries and so forth. So, you know, it's amazing to know that there's just so much to know, right? And even Lama Tsongkhapa would just say like, you know, I don't want to be excessive and I don't want to put too much here, but I do encourage you and tell you, you're going to need to know more. Very, very, very wonderful. So let's end there. I know it's 12 o'clock. Time. Okay. Time is time. Does anyone have any questions? Yes, Priscilla.
Hello.
How are you?
Oh, hanging in there. I just wanted to apologize. I by mistake I hit a button and unmuted, and I'm sitting outdoors with my dog. and about 10 varieties of birds just listen to the Dharma.
Oh, that's so wonderful. I prayed that it could be understood in the language of all beings, right?
Well,
so I hope it was.
Yeah, but my dog didn't listen very well.
Oh boy.
So,
I know that. I know that.
Yes, I know, you know, dogs, they are intelligent and they lack discernment. And I had to correct his behavior, and that's what you heard.
It's interesting though, because your question, maybe your dogs made you ask the question, because your question landed. If I heard it correctly, it wasn't a question, maybe it was a statement, but it sounded like it landed in a like, well, how do you know it's true? Something like that. And it was very, very interesting to me.
I say unusual things to my dog.
Yeah. So anyway,
and he's, you know, chasing chipmunks or eating grass or something. So I'll say unusual things to him, and then he pays attention to me instead of what he's doing that's getting him in trouble. So anyway, I just wanted to apologize for that.
Yeah, I think if we had a video reel of my unusual things I say to my dog, we may have less students. Anyway, that's a joke, but
a dog is definitely for its lifetime a lesson in patience for the owner.
No question about it. No matter, there's one. There's the number one patience propagator in our household. Suma, I love that dog more than I could love anything. And I also have never had to develop more patience for a being in my life than that dog that's yawning and showing her big head in the camera right now. Oh, Suma. Rinpoche loved
There he
that
is.
dog right there so much. You can't even begin to understand. Like the way he would behave around Suma, and
Yeah.
he would just wanted her to have everything all the time. Like Suma would have literally just blown up and died if I fed her. He's like, oh, animals are always hungry. She's hungry. Can't you just give her a little food? And he was just always so concerned about, and I'm thinking like, I haven't eaten yet. I've been up all morning running around. I had unhooked, you know. But he was just always so concerned because you know what? Suma didn't have the same capabilities as I did. I could have gotten up and gotten myself food. Suma can't. That's why he didn't bring me up. Because
Well, I just showed you my dog.
I saw.
And a very sweet dog, but he wouldn't look at the camera.
Well, I don't blame him.
No, the only time he would look at the camera, and it's for, I've had him for 11 years now. And the only time he would look at the camera for the Zoom teachings is when Rinpoche was on.
Remember when he was so sick and you didn't think he'd live and Rinpoche told you he'd be okay?
Yes, and now we're dealing with more illness.
Oh.
And the vet thinks he has Cushing's.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I
That's
definitely.
not good. That's maximum 2 years.
Pup is in my prayers, but at 11, 13 is a pretty long run.
Not for a dachshund.
Oh, I see.
They'll live up to 20.
Maybe the quality though. He got to see Rinpoche, so maybe his shortened life is so he can be a human quicker and be practitioner. We always have to try to look at positive, right?
I keep telling him to practice, but I don't think he listens.
Yeah, Suma has a huge mass on her hip right now. And it's we got it drained. They didn't find any cancer, but she probably, and who knows, soon won't be able to walk, and we're gonna have to have a major operation on her to remove this huge fat mass. And just she's 8 years old, you know.
A lipoma.
Yeah, it's her whole, I'm not joking, it's if you took a basketball and cut it in half and just made it a little smaller that would fit on our dog's hip, it's that large and hard as a rock. And she walks with her leg in like this.
She probably has other small ones. My dog has like 7 of them.
I see. So
they are typical old dog things.
Yeah. So she can't run like she could. And this is just the suffering of, our dog has the suffering of birth, aging, sickness, and death like we do. And unfortunately, their lifespan is much shorter and they don't really know what's going on as much as we do. So thank you for taking care of him in such an important way. Thank you so much.
Oh, he's a sweetheart, mostly. But anyway, and we don't know how much they understand.
Yes, no, I totally agree.
That's my other offering about dogs, because they're not obscured by language. So who knows?
No, it's totally possible. There's bodhisattva dogs.
Yeah.
But then they're not really dogs, but that's another debate altogether. I got into it with Geshe-la a little bit. And I didn't land where I would wanted to, but
yeah, that's another discussion for another time. I do have interesting things to say about that, but not now.
Cool. Anyone else? Thank you so much. I sent that text out because a couple of people were saying, is there still a teaching this morning? And I just wanted to make sure that there was clarification. I wasn't trying to be in anything other than that, just clarifying.
It was helpful because the link was directly there.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's do the concluding prayers. And I just want to thank everybody for listening so well. I know this is a lot of information, and some of it isn't always so comfortable to hear. I want to thank Lori for that fish reference, that meditation that we did this morning. She started talking about it, and I didn't tell her, but I said, man, that's really, really and I worked on it a little bit in my mind and thought about what it would feel like, to have be swimming around, and then all of a sudden that happens. And that, wouldn't that be a way to think about compassion? And so I want to thank Lori for that. Anyway, let's make a concluding mandala offering of a perfect, beautiful universe that we just talked about that says, thank you, instructor, all the way to Buddha so the Buddha, when he became enlightened, said, no one's going to understand this. And then I'm going to retire to the woods. That's what the Buddha did. The Buddha's, in the historical story, the Buddha says, this clear light I've come to understand is not something, who else could comprehend it? So therefore, since no one can comprehend it, I shall retire to the woods and just go retire to the woods. And then he was requested to teach and then turned the wheel of Dharma. That's another long, long teaching. But it was so kind, right? The Buddha almost, because someone requested it. Someone made a mandala offering and said, please teach it. The Buddha turned the wheel. And now it's like, well, thank you, Buddha, for not retiring into the woods, into solitude. Thank you so much for teaching Shariputra and teaching Mugiputra and teaching Mahachembo Mahasattva and teaching Vajrapani and Chenrezig and teaching all of these great beings. It's saying, thank you for not retiring to the forest. And then it's saying, thank you, Chenrezig and Vajrapani and all of these beings. And then thank you, passing down to the Indian Pandits of Nagarjuna and Asanga. And thank you to all of these other great beings, Dharmakirti and Dignaga and Chandarashita and Shantideva and Chandrakirti and all of these great beings we hear about, Aryadeva. And then we get to Tibet and Lama Tsongkhapa and Guru Padmasambhava, who and Chandarashita and Kamalashila, who came into Tibet to clarify wrong views about Dharma. When we make this offering, I'm sitting here, but we're making it to this huge lineage of beings back to Shakyamuni and saying, thank you for not retiring into the woods. Thank you for not keeping this truth to yourself. And the Buddha wasn't being not compassionate. He just didn't think that anyone wanted to hear it or could. It's kind of a trick too when you study it. But it's important to go all the way back. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. I dedicate whatever virtues I have collected for the benefit of the teachings and of all sentient beings, and in particular, the essential teachings of Venerable Losang Drakpa to shine forever. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri and likewise Samantabhadra as well. With whatever dedication is praised as supreme by all the conquerors who traverse the three times, I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. In that pure land surrounded by snowy mountains, you are the source of all benefit and happiness, all powerful Avalokiteshvara, Tenzin Gyatso, may you stay until samsara's end. I pray that we may be connected in all our lives to Kensur Geshe Wandak in whatever form he emanates from the Dharmakaya. And may we pray that we can meet Rinpoche in the Sambhokaya form when we are Arya Bodhisattvas. And we will be. Give yourselves credit and don't take this mundane stuff so seriously. It'll pass. Things are impermanent. Only thing that matters and is lasting is this. All right. Thank you. Have a wonderful week and try and be a better person when I see you next Thursday than you were today, right? Like try to put these Dharma practices put these things into practice and be a better human being at the other side of this when I see you Thursday. And I'm going to try to do the same. So we'll see how we did, right? We'll see how it goes. Thanks.